All right, man, so it's that time of year to talk about who should be inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame and who should not. And, you know, there's a debate every year who's worthy, who's not. But there's two guys this year who, to me, they are an interesting conversation of whether or not they should be Hall of Famers. That's Chris Webber and Chris Bosh. Let me take Webber first before I move to Bosh. I'm clearly in the minority in this one on Chris Webber. It seems like Chris Webber, most people who follow the game, like I do, for a long time, it feels like they 100% believe that Chris Webber is a Hall of Famer. Like there's no question, like he is, certified first ballot Hall of Famer. And I don't necessarily agree with that, and I don't agree with that because I feel like there are two things for me, like when I evaluate if a guy is truly a Hall of Famer. One is like just the eye test. Like when you were watching him during his career, did it feel like he was a Hall of Famer? That's like the smell test, right? The eye test. Did it feel like he was a Hall of Famer? All right. And to me, that answer is no. Chris Webber was a very good player for a very long time. His name was, in MVP conversations a couple of years. Never won a title, of course, never been to the finals. But in his heyday in Sacramento, a very good player, perennial all-star, all of that. But I just never thought like Hall of Fame though, just watching him. Hall of Fame never really crossed my mind. And he doesn't have any hardware, any championships, but of course you don't need that to get to the Hall of Fame, of course, as we've seen. But that's the eye test. The eye test tells me no with Chris Webber. But now when I look at like on paper, he played for, he played at a high level for more than 10 years and his career averages are like 20 and like 9.8. Call it 20 and 10. So I was surprised when I look at his career numbers and I saw it was 20 and 10. So for a long period of time. So those numbers say perhaps he's in the discussion. But again, just watching him during his career, like my answer was no, or I would have said he never really crossed my mind in terms of like he is definitely worthy of Hall of Fame consideration with Chris Webber. So I think he eventually will get in because in the NBA and basketball, a lot of guys get in who probably, I shouldn't say don't deserve it because that sounds disrespectful. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I say a lot of guys get in who, to me, I'm surprised that they get in basketball. In all the major sports, I feel like basketball is the easiest to get into. Now, Chris Bosh is probably the flip side of that, right? Most people probably feel like Chris Bosh is not a Hall of Famer. And I'm here to tell you Chris Bosh absolutely is a Hall of Famer. And what's interesting, and this is going to make no sense, Chris Webber probably was a better player than Chris Bosh. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because based on what I just said about Chris Webber. Chris Bosh, when he was in Toronto, to me, I wasn't overwhelmed with what Chris Bosh brought to the table. A decent player, but I wasn't overwhelmed. But he goes down to Miami, 2 championships, perennial all-star. Now, you can't ignore the 2 championships. And you can't just say, oh, Chris Bosh only won because of LeBron and D Wade. If you remove Bosh from those 2 titles, from those Miami Heat teams, I don't think the Heat win those 2 championships. He was the X factor, he was the glue and all that. So he gets in, I think, because of the hardware does Chris Bosh. Easier for me. So again, I look at Chris Webber, Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh is an easier yes to me than Chris Webber is. Ultimately, I think they'll both get in. But again, going through this, man, I go to the eye test and looking on paper. The eye test for Chris Bosh told me no, right? But what he did, the accomplishments and, the championships, that gets him in. But whereas Chris Webber, eye test told me no, but on paper, perhaps. They'll both get in. So I'm really wasting my time with this. All right, moving along. Dak Prescott just got paid. I don't know if you heard, he got paid. What was it, like 4 years, 160 million, some crazy number, right? And he's like getting like 75 million in year 1. So congratulations to Dak. He's getting paid. And now it's been no mystery that Dak Prescott is the franchise quarterback for the Cowboys for a long time. Like we've known this for years that he's a franchise quarterback, but he's been getting, I think, strung along with franchise tag talks and just, smaller deals here, not getting him what he wanted to get, what he wanted to get, of course, which was long-term stability. So while it seems like Jerry Jones finally woke up and gave the guy who we all know is their franchise quarterback money, right? Like the next day we find out that like the NFL is on the cusp of a huge TV deal. They're getting $2 billion from CBS and $2 billion from NBC to extend those TV deals, so more money is spread around to the teams. So Jerry Jones knows he's getting more money to allocate to player contracts. So like, is that the reason why he decided to finally now give Dak the money? It looks like yes, that's probably the answer. So he does right by Dak, but it's almost like it's like when Nas just won a Grammy. It was like, here, man, you happy now? Here, take it. Here's your Grammy. Finally, take your Grammy. Like, that's what it felt like when the Grammys gave Nas his Grammy finally. Like, they give Dak the money. It's like, hey, take the money. Like, are you happy now? Just take your money. Like, that's what it feels like. But if I'm Dak, I don't care if it's because of a TV deal, a shoe deal, a sneaker deal, or whatever kind of deal. If I'm getting my money and I'm Dak, secure, right? Guaranteed. That's all I'm worried about. So congratulations to Dak. And another reason why it tells me that Jerry Jones needed this financial backing to give Dak his money, because the man just tore up his leg last year. So you wait till like he comes off of a serious, gruesome injury to give him big money. Why not do it when he was healthy and he was still performing? So Jerry, you're not slick, but Dak, congratulations nonetheless. And speaking of the Cowboys, the Texas Rangers and the Dallas Cowboys, they are, I'm sure you heard this as well too, they are the first two major North American sports teams that are allowing 100% of fans into their stadiums in this upcoming season. So no more limited restriction, right? So like the first team to announce it was the Texas Rangers, and then the Cowboys, I think like maybe later on that day or the next day. And now, like, no, this is not me getting political, because wearing masks and COVID, that's not a political discussion. That's a matter of science. So I guess I'm getting scientific, okay, not political. So for me, so they're allowing 100% capacity, both of these teams, but they're mandating that the fans have to wear masks and only pull down the masks when you are eating or drinking. So I got a question. In a stadium that holds 40,000-50,000 people, who is walking around and policing whether or not people actually have their masks down to eat or drink? Like, that's my only question in all of this. Like, who is doing that? Because I tell you this, you couldn't pay me enough money to be, to work, to be security in either one of those stadiums, to walk up and down and try to tell somebody in a state where the governor just said you don't have to wear masks, to tell somebody put your mask up. Can you imagine like the altercations that are going to ensue in those two stadiums in this upcoming season between fans who don't want to put their mask back up, and security telling them, hey, you have to put it up or we're going to ask you to leave? Can you imagine? Like, you couldn't pay me enough. Who is signing up to do that? Couldn't be me. Not me. Switching gears over to back to the NBA. Patrick Ewing got into a little, I don't know. I would say he was upset. He was coaching his Georgetown Hoyas in the Big East tournament, and in Madison Square Garden, the building that he built, and he says in a post-game press conference that he was, quote, being accosted, is what he said. People kept, the security, they were bugging him and accosting him, I guess maybe asking him for, his passes to get by in the hallway, not sure who he was. Now, let me give Madison Square Garden security the benefit of the doubt on this, because that's all I know in the story is that, like, he spoke about this for like I don't know, 15 seconds. He didn't give much detail, but let me give the Garden security the benefit of the doubt. Let me assume that maybe he had his mask on. He had his mask on. They didn't know who you were, Pat. They didn't know who you were, okay? Wait a minute. No, that doesn't make sense, because how many 7-footers are walking around the hallways of Madison Square Garden with a Georgetown polo on the day that Georgetown plays a game in the Garden? How many? Probably one. His name is probably Patrick Ewing. So, and Ewing alluded to this, is James Dolan up to his old tricks? Like, we remember that, last year allegedly he gave Spike Lee a hard time. Spike Lee couldn't enter the way he normally enters to go to his seat. And Spike has paid, $3 million in his life in order to sit courtside at Knicks games. And they're bugging him in terms of how he has to get to his seat last year. That didn't make any sense to me. So the same thing going on with Patrick Ewing. And even before that, we can't forget what happened to Charles Oakley in the stands, right? We can't forget it, right? Security rushed him, and listen to me. When security rushed Charles Oakley, he did the single most disrespectful thing that you could do to another human being besides spitting in their face. He gave him a single-fingered mush right to the forehead. Only thing more disrespectful than that to me is spitting in someone's face. But I digress. So is it a matter of Patrick Ewing being bugged, Spike Lee, and Charles Oakley? Like, is James Dolan really giving these guys a hard time? Patrick Ewing, the most decorated, the most popular player in the franchise's history. Spike Lee, the biggest fan in the franchise's history. Charles Oakley, a fan favorite. When there's smoke, there's usually fire. And I'm a Knicks fan. I'm going to hope these are just isolated incidents and we can all move beyond these things. All right, last but not least, did you hear? This was funny to me. It's funny to even say it. It's funny to even think it. LeBron is a part owner. Let me start over. LeBron James is a part owner of the Boston Red Sox. That sounds hilarious because Boston fans hate LeBron. They hated him before he got to Miami. They hated him towards the end of his Cleveland run. Boston fans cannot stand LeBron James. And now you're telling me that Boston fans and their beloved Red Sox have to call LeBron James owner of the historic, storied franchise. That is hilarious. And the part that's killing me is everybody's on social, the day it was announced, everyone's on social media tweeting out pictures of LeBron in a Yankee hat. Like, that's supposed to somehow diminish him becoming part owner of the Red Sox. That's supposed to diminish this business play. First of all, you can never look at a guy, wearing a hat, the baseball hat, and think it has anything to do with allegiance. And a lot of times it has to do with what he's wearing. Does it match what he's wearing? A Yankee hat, in a lot of sense, is just a fashion statement, a cultural statement. You don't have to have ever watched a Yankee game or been to a Yankee game or care about the Yankees. A Yankee hat is a Yankee hat, largely because of Jay-Z. But that's what it is. So don't tweet this Yankee hat picture of LeBron makes no sense. And secondly, that aside, let's just stop taking LeBron for granted. Like, what he does on the court, that's one thing. But what he does off the court, he never ceases to amaze from a business standpoint, from his school in Akron to business decisions like this. Like, this is a huge deal to me. Let's not diminish it, because my first thought when I saw the Yankee hats being tweeted around was that, once again, we are taking LeBron for granted.